Welcome to section 7, the recommendations for the practice success. This is the last section in your e-learning. There will be only one application questions from this topic in the exam, just one question out of the total 20. These recommendations will be mapped to the ITIL guiding principles as well, and let's take a look at what these recommendations are for the practice success. First of all, a summary of the 7 ITIL guiding principles, which you would have learned from your ITIL foundation course. And these are: focus on value, start where you are, meaning leverage what is already available, then starting something fresh, then progress iteratively with feedback, meaning work in an agile way, collaborate and promote visibility, and think and work holistically. Do not work in isolation in just one area because something could impact something else. Keep it simple and practical. Do not make it complicated. Then optimize and automate. So first streamline an existing process, that is optimize, and then improve it, and then only automate it. So there are some recommendations coming up. We've got this and the next slide to work on. The first one is to focus on value for the users. Now, all these recommendations are quite intuitive. And for the exam, you need to be familiar with what each recommendation is. You may be given a small situational question or a small scenario question. And then you would have to identify which principle need to be applied here or is being applied already, or what should be the recommendation to correct that situation. So the first one is to focus on value for the users, which means the value from the service request for the users should be considered. And the value actually is the better usage of IT services by the users. For example, if a user is asked for a replacement laptop, and the value for the user is that that will help the user to work in a better way by getting a replacement laptop. Therefore, the practice should enable users to use IT services and enable business value. It should not be used solely to delegate the IT maintenance responsibilities of users. So it's not just, we're just serving the users just for their maintenance work. Otherwise, the focus on value principle would be lost. Next, ensure clear and user-friendly interfaces and procedures. What that means is this practice is a key user touch point in the service relationship. A touch point means whenever the user is coming in contact with the service provider. Now, the contact can be in two ways. One is the actual interaction for a service with a human or a technology. And a touch point could be where they, for example, they are reading an article about the organization somewhere else. That's also a touch point. So we have the touch points and service interactions together making up the user journey or the customer journey. And so these are important. The service request management becomes a key user touch point for user experience and the provider image. And that's what is mentioned here. It impacts the overall user experience and the image of the service provider, which means collaborate and promote visibility, which means understand the user's needs. So keep it simple and practical, make it convenient for the user. And it's mentioned in the recommendation, ensure clear and user-friendly interfaces and procedures. And that can be done only by understanding the user's needs. The third recommendation, consider monitoring and event management for maintenance-focused events. So what this means is do regular maintenance based on the monitoring and event management. Keep that in place in the organization rather than users requesting for it. For example, a user may request for some data or file maintenance for their files and data. But can that be done using monitoring and event management? That would be even better. So consider that. Then it will remove the need for the user to raise the request. So that's what is part of the comment. Where possible, use monitoring to detect the need for regular maintenance rather than delegate it to users. Allow users to focus on using the services, not on servicing the technology. They should not be bothered about file cleanup and or other things like that. So focus on value and optimize and automate. So put everything onto automated ways rather than manual requests from the users. And that can be done here in this case using the monitoring and event management practice. Focus on the service value stream. That's the next recommendation. Value stream, you already know it combines various practices so that the complete cycle for the users request fulfillment is smooth for them. In fact, this cycle would be smooth for the IT teams as well. Even IT teams should not struggle when they work with each other. And that's because the fulfillment of service requests may involve other management practices such as change enablement, deployment management, release management, information security management, and others. Manage the end-to-end service value stream, ensuring that the flow is seamless for both users and IT teams. So this is going to be important. So if, for example, if there's a deployment request for a server, it will first go to the service desk. Somebody might call up the service desk to make a request for that. And if it is not part of the standard change, it will go to a normal change. And otherwise, it could go to a standard change, and that will be part of the service request management itself. And then there could be some lessons learned while doing that. If there's a failure of the deployment, and that can go into knowledge management as some kind of a lesson learned. And before the deployment is completed, a deployment in ITIL 4 means keeping the environment ready. It's not ready for use by the user, but keeping it ready first, creating the environment or whatever. And while doing that, some kind of testing will be needed. So the service validation and testing, some part of that will come up. And afterwards, the server can be made available to whoever has requested it. And that means it's going to be done through release management practice. So therefore, even though these steps look very close to each other, but in fact, the actual activities will come from those other practices. And imagine that the service request management has to make sure that that entire cycle runs smoothly for the user. They can't go back to the user and say that we have done our job from our practice, but something is stuck with deployment management or service validation and testing or knowledge management, change enablement, service desk, or release management, and so on. So here, think and work holistically for the value streams and focus on value. Then we have the next one. We have a couple more. So here we have start with the most popular service request. And even if there is no current service catalog and request catalog, and if it's not complete, it's just partial or incomplete, start with the most popular request received by the service desk. So service desk should be at least be aware as to what kind of requests they are actually receiving in larger number. And if they inform that to the concerned manager or a practice manager or whoever, potential person who can influence the management to get this practice in place, then they could start with those service requests to be put into place at level 2 properly. And understand and optimize their fulfillment, then proceed to the second most popular and third most, and so on. So that users feel that, yes, they're being paying attention to, and so on. So start where you are, just begin where we are, whatever comes in on the plate in larger numbers, go with that. And progress iteratively with feedback, meaning do step by step. Don't try to move the mountain, break the mountain into smaller rocks and then move a rock each. Pick up the rocks. These are more important from a user perspective. Then include feedback capturing in all service request models. Now this one demonstrates the commitment to continual improvement. As you can imagine, why is feedback taken from anybody for any purpose? It's mainly for improvement, isn't it? Therefore, this is the principle here is progress iteratively with feedback. So keep on taking feedback and keep on making improvements. So continually capture and analyze user feedback and improve the service request models accordingly. Use the service request management to demonstrate a commitment to continual improvement. I remember from my experience, sometimes we would be fulfilling those requests, but something would be missing in the deployment. So for example, if we give access to a certain number of licenses as part of a service request, and there would be something problematic with that request. For example, that license might work on only certain version of a operating system and not on other versions of the operating system. And the user might get back and say that, hey, it's not working on my system. And that's because they have a different version as to the version the license was tested on or is applicable to. So that feedback should be processed immediately, at least in this case, on the spot, so that the user's issue is resolved. But then it should be used for improving the models.